what we do matters more than any other time, maybe more than we can imagine. And I think that if we're going to talk about war as people of faith, then we need to remember that as well. That when we read Jesus, as we talked about last week, at the heart of who Jesus was this way of nonviolence, reconciliation, of love, and that if we're going to talk about war at all, and it has to be something that is deeply, deeply wrestled with, keeping in mind all the things we just talked about of what comes from this. And in church history, go ahead with this. We have two different ways we've talked about war. One is just war theory. The other is pacifism. We'll get to that too. Maybe not today. Maybe next week. We'll see how things go. But the idea of just war theory is not often when we thought about it. That often people kind of treat just war theory as how to justify war, and that's not what it means at all. It means if we're going to war, it has to be just. It has to be the right reasons. Click one more time. One of the things we have to keep in mind, though, is that the whole idea of a just war developed in the context of an officially Christian Roman Empire. That for the first 300 some years of the church, that there were no Christians who supported war. Christians were pacifists by and large. They opposed war. In about 300, when Constantine became emperor and made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, now Christians face this issue of if our empire is now officially Christian and our empire goes to war, how do we deal with that as Christians? And so you see with St. Augustine and like we talked about Justin Martyr, wrestling with this. And what we have to wrestle with when we're thinking about this too is to remember, like we shared the past couple of weeks, that one of the things that this aspect of Christianity being the official religion of the empire was that it created that dualism of, well, these things we'll treat as Caesar's realm and these things as God's realm. And so keep that in mind that if we're going to talk about just war, we have to treat it in the realm of where Jesus put us, of everything belongs to God. Nothing belongs to Caesar. If we're going to talk about war, how does it fit the context of this God who is about love and healing and forgiveness and reconciliation? So, next one. Therefore, how are we doing? Are we stopped? First off, we have to understand that just war theory understands violence and war to be wrong. That they are never, ever good options, that they are wrong. Second, there must be no other option to bring about a just end. I must feel that we're in the context that there's no other option. I think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Any of you heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer before? Dietrich Bonhoeffer was actually also a Lutheran. A Lutheran pastor, theologian, seminary teacher in Germany who, for a while, left as Hitler rose to power, but went back because he felt that what he was doing wasn't right and he needed to be part of opposing him. He was actually going to go to India to meet with Gandhi because he was dedicated deeply to nonviolence, but he felt he had to stay in Germany because of what Hitler was doing. And he ended up, this man who wanted to stay with Gandhi about nonviolence, ended up participating in a plot to kill Hitler. And what he said, in his book he wrote on ethics was that if there's a madman driving a car around, running over people, that sometimes the only option is to shoot the madman. So he participated in this plot. Although they failed, my internship once said, he said, the problem was they weren't evil enough to pull it off. All right. So if you're going to have just war, the only option must be to bring about a just end. That there's no other way to get there. Click. Okay. So basically, there are what we call 8 rules of just war theories. And if you're going to have just war, these are the 8 rules that you need to look at. The first is this: just cause. All right. Click it again. And just cause would mean that a just cause would be to defend against attack by another country. That was another country's attack. There's no way to stop it but war. Right? It has to be a just cause, that you aren't the one the aggressor. Second part of that, another one of the just causes, to stop the massacre of people within a country. Often we thought about just country against countries, but as we've seen in our age, there are countries that have sought to exterminate people within their own country, and sometimes we have helped to stop this, and other times we've let it happen. All right, click again. Second, you need to have just authority. All right, click one more time. Talk about just authority. One, those who will fight and die must have a say in the decision to go to war. And actually, the scenes we're looking at were scenes from movies about Vietnam, which is probably one of the most unjust wars, if you go by this theory. For one thing, we didn't have a say in it. In fact, it was never really declared. It just happened. It didn't go through the processes that were supposed to happen. So we did not have representation in going. So, like we saw with Baba, why are we here? I didn't choose this. So those who fight and die must have a say in the decision to go to war. Also, Also, if we're talking about just authority, the international community should also give approval. You know, before we went to the first Gulf War, we made a point of going to the United Nations and other nations to say they concur. Second Gulf War, we didn't do that. We didn't do that with Vietnam. You know, it didn't matter. We just decided on our own. So saying, look, if we're right, we as one nation can't decide these things. That we are part of a world community, and they must have a say. And if they don't think it's right, then we should not be doing this. Next, it also must be a last resort. Right? Look at it again. All of the forms of conflict resolution, of negotiation, and prevention must be exhausted before going to war. Actually, when we were going to go into Haiti to deal with issues there, really made a point of trying to seek this and went to the UN. And while that was happening, I think it was Jimmy Carter actually went to Haiti and was able to bring resolutions. So we didn't have to go in. So we need to make sure we try all other means before we do this. The next one, we must have just intention, which is about the final cause or future aim. In other words, what we want to end up with has to be something that's just. All right? For instance, quick. Only a just peace can be the goal for all involved, not revenge or conquest or economic gain or ideological supremacy. Remember people talking about, we didn't go to Rwanda when the massacre was happening there, but we went into Iraq, and people say, well, what's the difference between those two places? Well, one has oil. Right? And people raise that question, is that why we were there? Is that why we didn't go here and we didn't go there? So we need to really be honest about that, and we need to be reflective too, because the things we're told may not be what's really going on. You know, I remember when I was in college talking about Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin incident. I think you're in the Gulf of Tonkin. It was kind of supposed to be like the Pearl Harbor of Vietnam, where we were attacked and could enter in, and it was all made up. It never happened, right? There was, you know, so it was. You know, so we need to make sure that what we hear is what's really happening. So just intention, that we're really trying to get peace. That's the final goal. Click on again. We also have to have a probability of success, right? Actually, when we went into Vietnam, we knew we couldn't win. We knew that. You know, we looked and said that this wasn't going to work, but we did it anyways. If you're not going to win, you're not likely to do it. Don't go in. Click. Proportionality of cost. All right, click it one more time. What that means is that the total good achieved must outweigh the total evil and suffering achieved by the war. If what's going to happen by the time you get done with this is worse than where you're at now, then you don't do it. Right? You don't do it. Actually, can you think of one kind of war where that would be the case? Oh, we'll get to that in a second. Let's see if you're thinking. I'm a little tired today. Next one. We must have a clear announcement. Click that one more time. All right, not just the intentions to go to war, but what enemy must do to avoid or stop the war. Like we talked about with Haiti, we said, you know, these things, and they were willing to negotiate. One of the things in the first Gulf War, we went to the United Nations. They were with us. We announced the things that Iraq needed to do to stop the war, and then they were willing to do it, and we went anyways. It's pretty clear that we never really intended to do what we said. All right? So we need to remember that if we're not just saying we're going to go to war, but we want this not to happen if we can, and if you're willing to work with us, you know, we will work with you. And number 8, the war must be fought by just means. And this means, for instance, 1, a nuclear war can never be just. Right? The cost always will outweigh the ends. In fact, most likely, it's a question of whether any of us would survive, much less the world we see. So it can never be just. Which raises the question of whether we can even have such weapons under just war theory. Also, civilians can never be targets. Now, they argue that they might be hit by accident, but if they are intentional targets, it cannot be just. Also, torture or killing of those who surrender must never happen. And terrorism must never occur. Terrorism, doesn't care about who the casualties are. It's the ends are everything. And under just war theory, it is never just. And the other big thing about this is this. Go ahead. All the criteria must be met for the war to be just. Failure to meet one is a failure. It is a failure, to fight a just war. Right? Now, I think what's interesting for us as people of faith is that often what we hear about just war is in more how we can justify going to war rather than is a war really just or not. And so we need to lift that up. Click on again. Excuse me. We're going to watch a little clip actually here after this if we could. Go ahead and click that for us.
great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must be ours.
Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, "You're too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God." The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. Other civil rights leaders, for various reasons, refuse or can't take a stand or have to go along with the administration. That's their business. But I must say tonight that I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
With war, I think the moral force of Dr. King's opposition had to be an enormous body blow to the president.
How many of you knew that Martin Luther King Jr. spoke out against the Vietnam War? You know that? Yeah. In fact, it was very difficult because many people who had supported him didn't after that, because as Christians that's what we were supposed to do. And he was talking about other civil rights leaders, he said, who didn't want to speak up because they felt they had to go along. One of the issues with just war is the question of can we ever get there? The only war we can have is a just war. Too often we do things that undermine it. You know, really, what is he saying about our country? Who do we act like we are? So I said, well, we're like the international police officers. We think, you know, that we're going to keep things right. And one of the things that pointed out in the book on kingdom ethics is that anytime a nation thinks it has the corner on what's just and what's right, then we're really in trouble. And we're going to decide for everybody else. That's part of what's going on. And who were the people who were actually doing the fighting, he said? The poor. They were black and white, but it was poor folks, right? Who were the ones doing it. And you see that throughout history, too. So one of the questions we have to raise is, first, any war, if we feel we can support it, if that's the only means to deal with something, is it just? Right? But one of the things that's raised up as we go into talking about the issue of pacifism or nonviolence is there any war that can ever be just?